Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today is January 14th, Saturday, and then that's our first section on Asian philosophy in 2023. And then since we already continue from last year, so I will continue our journey for the Chinese philosophy. And then let me see. So today, our subject, I just like to mention, even I follow the book from the book called A Short History of Chinese Philosophy from Feng You Lan. But I will treat every section as independent. So even you didn't join the last section, and then you're supposed to be able to understand every section without previous knowledge. So that's my purpose. So I will try to follow the book, and then we have a few chapters to finish in this year. And my plan probably will go back to beginning to restart. So even you have, I know a lot of people may not join on the early section in the last year, so that's the chance for you to catch up. But for those who already joined and already listen, participant on the previous section, and I think I will bring new things. And then if I cannot bring new things for some expert, then please join me to present what you thought about this. So I would like to bring this one as a more collective discussion. And if you feel like you know something, and I will really appreciate if you can contribute. And second thing is I will not strictly just follow the book, because from time to time, I will bring different subject. For example, next week, Pin may present a book of change about I Ching, okay, the first chapter, okay. And then Huang, I think in February, will introduce ancient text called Chun Chu, which is legendary authored by Confucius. We also have the Indian expert, SK. He will also bring us the, I think this year, his plan is doing the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters, and he's going to present 2 chapters every time. So we probably take 9 months to finish it. So that's our plan. And everyone, if you have any idea you think it would be, you like to present, or you want to have a talk, and please contact me from Meetup, and I will, I can prepare a section so we can work together. So please make this one as community so everybody can participate. And then the subject I try to cover is historical, cultural, philosophy, and center on philosophy. And the area is, since Chinese culture, the pan-Chinese culture is the major one, but of course it includes Korean, Japan, Vietnam, and the Southeast Asia, India. That's all the area I try to cover. So if you have a background or you know somebody have this kind of knowledge, please let me know, and I'm very happy to have this kind of variety. So that's, today we talk about Zhu Xi, and then if you don't know who is Zhu Xi, and then you should know, okay, after 1 hour. Okay. So let's go over the schedule. So that's the schedule. Today we talk about the Zhu Xi, and the title from the book is Neo-Confucianism. And Feng You Lan put the title as Platonic Idea, the School of Platonic Idea. I think that's very good. And when I when I read the text, I find out that's a very good description about Zhu Xi. And next week, as I mentioned, it's a Chinese New Year, so Pin is going to present the Book of Change, the I Ching, and the first chapter, and we will let you know, whether or not we will keep this schedule, and we are not going to. He may not take off on this day. So then I will continue, and on the end of January, I will present another Neo-Confucianism, which so-called the Heart Mind School, Wang Yangmin, that's much later. Then we go on for the Bhagavad Gita, Indian, and the Kwang is going to talk about Chunqiu, which is the end of the spring and the autumn, and then blah, 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 they were going to continue. So that's the weekly project, and then I will post 1 week before. And they have some reading material. I hope you can spend time to read it and then join our discussion. One thing is I will start to do some paper, because on 2021, I start with reading some paper, the philosophical paper and the discussion. So I may start to repeat this kind of subject again. So sometimes if you have, I know some people already send me some paper or some article regarding Asian philosophy. So please, if you find some interested article or some subject you want to discuss, please send the information to me, and I will make this one as a section. So that's everything about our schedule. So any question, comment, any expectation? No question?
I have a request, not a question.
Okay, please.
Do we get to learn the Book of Change from the first chapter to the last?
No, probably answer is no. Okay, because if we talk about chapter, okay, that means brief introduction. Okay, I Ching, Book of Change, that's a very ancient text, and the organization is a little bit complex. Who's this guy? Okay, so anyway, it's a bit complex. So total would be 64 gua, or we call it hexagram. Okay, so I don't think we will, but if we spend 10 years with us, we probably can do it. Pim probably want to say it. He's an expert.
Oh, well, no expert. But my thought was I would cover a few of the, well, in my opinion, the most important ones. Qian, found the opportunity to do the second chapter, Kun. And then there's a third one that I think is very interesting, is Qian. And then that will get you started. And then we can, for those who are interested, they can study, read it on their own. Because as Jason said, I think it's really, there's 64 chapters, actually more than 64. And then it's also the text is very opaque. So it's really one of those things. I think it's more for that on our own, we just need to kind of read it over and over again before we really, and probably each time we read it, we'll get a little more out of it. So anyway, that's the thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Pin. Yeah, next week is a good time to discuss this. Okay, so Andrew, please.
Oh, sorry. I just a quick question about the text that you're discussing. That's a comparative study between the Chinese and Western philosophy.
No. Okay, Professor Feng You Lan. Okay, he was a student of Zhang Dui. Okay, so he wrote. I think he wrote this one when he taught in Princeton. I'm not sure which school, but when he taught them, so he find out it's difficult to introduce Chinese philosophy to the Western student. So he wrote this book. All right. So I think he has a longer book, and then he tried to make it, because most of people don't have the patience to read all of things, so he make it shorter. That's why he called short history, okay, of Chinese. But Chinese don't have a short history, okay. So that's the book, and the comparative between Western and Eastern is my personal interest. And then from time to time, you probably will see I bring up the paper to discuss this one. And the paper I bring up mostly actually is compare between Western and Eastern philosophy. And from time to time, you probably will see I bring up, like today, I will bring up another philosopher in England. Okay, so it's, sometimes I will see similarity. Madeline, please.
Yes. Hi, Jason. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Pin. Happy New Year to everyone. Well, I do have some specific questions about today's text, but before we get there, I just wanted to know, Pin, if you could cover the idea of changing lines in your presentation of the I Ching. And because I have trouble understanding that. And there are also one or two hexagrams that I would love to see covered. I don't know if you're going to take requests, but I'll message them to you.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
changing lines, yeah. So you remember last year I gave one where I explained that. Do you want just a refresher on that, or should I, was that also kind of opaque? So I can, I can try to improve upon that.
No, your presentation last year was very clear. It was great.
Oh, okay. So there's a YouTube link to that. But yeah, well, anyway, but I see your point. Yeah, I will give a quick summary of that. Since yeah, thank you for the suggestion. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so right now we put Pin as the expert on I Ching. So if you have a question on I Ching or you have any request on, please send a message to Pin, or you can send to me. I'm sure I will forward to Pin. And if he find out he already exhausted his knowledge, and I will help him find another expert to, if the group have enough interest. So
well, maybe I should admit up front that I've only read those like maybe 3 chapters in I Ching. So
but anyway, that's the fun, the good part of our group, because we all try our hard, and then so you also can read it like Madeline. If you find out you are interested in something, and then you probably can also present on the part that you already read, and then we will attract a lot of participants, and we will help you understand everything. So I think that's another way to do it. And during this almost 2 years of presentation, I find out I learned a lot from the people tell me what's the right thing, what's the wrong thing, and by a lot of questions, and make me to do more research. So I find out I improve a lot. So in a way, from time to time, I tell people, I do this one, probably I'm the person who benefit the most, because not financially benefit, but academic on the knowledge side, I benefit a lot, because from different kind of question and the suggestion. Okay, so let me move on. So so today I will quick break down to the 6th part of today's section. So at the end of each section, we can have a short discussion, and you can share what you know, and then if you have a question. Okay. So let's move on. Okay, so first, let me introduce Zhu Xi, the person. All right. So Zhu Xi when you read the text, okay, you may see the different spelling, Zhu Xi, okay, or Zhu Xi, and that's today's modern spelling. And then he was between 1130 to 1200s. If you're familiar with Chinese philosophy, Chinese history during this time is the so-called the Southern Song. Okay, so make it brief. The northern part is occupied by the Manchurian. Okay, so the southern part is so-called Chinese. Okay, during that time. So that's the time, Zhu Xi. So I'm not going to cover historical or political background today. But just let you know during the time. Today I'm going to strictly focus on Zhu Xi's philosophy. The reason I bring this one as the first section in the 2023, not only because we finished the Northern Song last year. More important, Zhu Xi has been, I think he is the most influential philosopher in Eastern Asia. Okay, I think this word is correct because some people may say Confucius, but actually most people practice or understand Confucius actually through Zhu Xi. And it's not only in China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, also in Korea, in Japan. Okay, so Zhu Xi, some scholars call it moral religious movement. So he kind of focused on the morality side of Confucianism and make it. He's a great philosopher, but this movement make it Confucianism become religious like. I will have more detail later. And this kind of movement start on the 12th century in China and on the 13th century in Korea and the 14th century in Japan. So the influence up to today. So definitely I can say he is the most influential philosopher in Eastern Asia. Okay, so I don't know anybody try to search Zhu Xi, these two words in the internet. Okay, so if you try it, you probably see Mao Zedong's picture show up. Okay, the reason is the spelling is the same as Zhu Xi, the chairman. So when you search Zhu Xi, you will sometimes say, "Whoa, okay, that's chairman in another way." So just don't mix with these two persons. All right. I think this comment is pretty good. I copy from Feng You Lan. He's a philosopher of subtle argument, clear thinking, wide knowledge, and voluminous literary output. He wrote a lot, just like a lot of philosophers. And then by this Western kind of definition, he is a philosopher. Okay, I think when I say he's a philosopher, I say in the Western standard, he definitely is a qualified, high quality philosopher. But again, a lot of criticize about him, okay, about his philosophy and his personal morality, and a lot of criticize about him. So that's another subject we can talk later. But today I will focus on his philosophy, okay, and not his personality or political side. So just make it clear. The school he started, all right, actually it's hard to say he started this school because before him already have a lot of movement which motivated by rescue Confucianism, because during that time there's a lot of the most popular thinking is Buddhism. Okay, so they try to reject Buddhism and the religious Taoism, and then they started. And Zhu Xi is the person who collect everything together and eventually become a standardized philosophy and for the rest of southern years in Eastern Asia, China, Korean, and Japan. Okay, so there's a different name. Okay, let's make it clear. Chinese name called Li Xue. Okay, that's the spelling. And then Li is difficult to translate because the pronunciation is the same as richer. Okay, Li. Okay, so I personally like to call it the school of the universal principle. Okay, sometimes people call it different name. I'll talk about later. And sometimes you will see in the text will call Cheng Zhu school because Cheng Yi, okay, I think Zhu Xi was born 23 years after Cheng Yi, and he kind of inherited what he's teaching. So we call this school Cheng Zhu school, which is opposite to another school called Lu Wang school. And I will introduce in the next section, which happened is later time. So sometimes you will see Cheng Zhu school, or sometimes people call it the Zhu Zi Xue, okay, the school of Zhu Zi. That means Mr. Zhu's school. Okay, so that's the different name. Okay, so when you read other article or search in internet, just pay attention. They all talk about the same thing. Okay. Another important is after him. Okay, 4 books become a standard. Okay, so we should know. Okay, what's when the Confucianism 4 books, standard book, just like in Christian, they have Old Testament and the New Testament, and the Chinese Confucianism, and not only in China, in Korean, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, any place where people talk about Confucianism, people all know what's the 4 books. So 4 books, Analects, which we are reading in every Tuesday, and Mencius. Great Learning, okay, Great Learning is very short. It's only about 1,200 words. Okay, it's very short. We read it on almost the same time last year, as the beginning section. We read word by word. Okay, it's very short. And the Doctrine of the Mean, that's another one. So that's the 4 books. And these 2 books are very short. Mencius is a little bit longer. Analect, it's not that long, only have the 10,000 character. So that's the standard 4 books. After Zhu Xi, okay, this one become standard. So here we talk about Zhu Xi's school called Li Xue. Okay, so Li, okay, I just want to make sure don't confuse with rituals, because if you read Confucius Analects, Li, okay, rituals is very important, but this Li is different. If you can recognize, that's the one, okay. Just make it clear. So you will see this one is ritual, okay, and this word.
No way, Joseph Bullock. I've seen you before. You're in some YouTube videos. No way, Joseph Bullock. I recognize you.
Okay. All right, so these 2 words will be different. So that's important. So today we talk about this word, okay, the school of universal principle. Okay. So actually, if you speak other language, Chinese language, than Mandarin, okay, so for example, in Taiwanese, these 2 words are different, the pronunciation. This one in, I believe Hong Kong also the same way. Okay, Kwang, you probably can correct me. I think in Taiwan, this word, ritual, is not called Li, we call they. Okay, we call they, and this one we call Li. Okay, so that's a different. But unfortunately, in Mandarin, they are the same. So let's make it very confusing. So probably we should use different language. But anyway, I think the way to do it is called the universal principle. I don't want to call it principle because it's too general. Okay. So sometimes you will see different kind of translation, and I just want to list here as for your reference, so you will know that we all talk about this here. We call Li Xue. Some people call it the pattern, okay? And then some translation, I just collect all the translation I have seen. So some book will call it the School of the Transcendental Principle. Okay, sounds too Kantian, so I don't think that's good. And some will put the School of Principle with capital P, and sometimes people call the School of Reason with capital R. Okay, and then sometimes they call it the School of Universal Law, or call the Rationalistic School, or easy way to call Zhu School. So they all means the same thing. Okay, so that's the standard school, start from Zhu Xi. So to this moment, I will assume you know at least who is Zhu Xi. Okay, so if you have any question, I will stop for 1 or 2 minutes before I move on to the next part. Any question or any comment? I hope it's clear on the, I think I forget this part, sorry. Another important associate with Zhu Xi is about the imperial examination. Okay, so let me see who is here. Anybody want to raise hand if you have been through this kind of examination? Have it? Okay, please. Fei Wu. You want to say something about your experience?
Oh, it was horrendous. The exam I had to take in mainland China, the university entry exam, because actually most of the things I have learned in elementary and secondary school has been forgotten because I was just memorizing instead of understanding.
Okay, and I did. Okay, so Andrew, please. Did you do it?
No, but I live in Korea, and I was curious if the Korean system is similar to the Chinese, because both for if you want to work for the government or become a teacher, they have these general national exams, which apparently is really, really hard. Some people spend a year just studying for that, you know, in these special cram schools. So same tradition?
Yes. So if you are in America or in the West, you may find that the Asian kids are pretty good test taker. That's already built in the gene. So you can think of this kind of system start from the 6th, 7th century, okay, and then runs through to the 1905. So they have about 1,300 years. Okay, so it's long enough to build in the gene. So so this system basics is start. Let me briefly, I think I will have it's interesting to have a section on, especially on this one, but this one, when you talk about Zhu Xi, you cannot divorce him from imperial examination. Okay, so it's a civil service examination system in imperial China, administrated for the purpose of selecting candidate for the state bureaucracy. So you may see that just like we talk about, it's a little bit funny, horrendous, and but if you think about that time, probably very advanced around the world, but nobody doing this idea, and that's a good idea. So you can avoid the merit. You can avoid the you can the social movement, right? Because anybody, as long as you pass the exam, you can become the government, work for the government. So that's the let's see, just one. So Angie, is anybody? Oh, whose hands up? Sorry, okay. Angie, oh, Joe, please.
So Didn't they have something similar with Confucius during Confucius's time as well, with test taking into civil service?
During Confucius' time? No.
Yeah. Okay. No. Okay.
That's one invented, okay, started in the, officially we can say start in the Sui dynasty, okay, which is about 581, that is here. And then Tang dynasty, okay. During that time, because the social movement, because they need people. So let's forget about the reason. But at that time, it's not very serious because you look at around the world during that time, you know, who can be the prime minister, be the general, be the minister. Usually it's relative or aristocrats, okay, or relative people. But China has made very different. They put a test to find the good people to work for the government. I think that's a good way to select talent to work for the government. And to the Song dynasty, last year we talked about Song dynasty is very different because it's a civil government. So civil government in a sense, in today's sense, is good government, let's put it this way, versus military government or aristocratic government. It's a good government. But during that time, without the technology, communication probably means bureaucracy. You need a lot of people work for the government. So in the Song dynasty, they start to have more people. They try to select more and more people. So after that, it becomes only the people pass the test that can work for government. So all the imperial relatives, they enjoy the luxury life, high ranking, but they have no power. So basics, all the power is belong to the emperor and the minister selected who passed the imperial examination. So this kind of system until I think according to Feng You Lan, on the 1330, okay, become a standardized test. And how do they standardize? They limit, because when you do this test, right, it could be very subjective and there is easy to be corruption. So we can test different things, write an article, you know, so it's very subjective. How are you going to do it? Just like today's SAT or ACT, that's a standardized test. So you just have the clear cut. Okay. So during that time, what they are doing, they limit the contents, okay, only on the 4 books. They don't test you about the legalism, they don't test you about Zhuangzi, Taoism, you know, Buddhism, nothing, only Confucianism. And in the Confucianism, they have many, many texts, but they only limit on these 4 books I mentioned, okay? And that mentions great learning and the doctrine of the mean. So only these 4 books. And they even limit, okay, so for some who already joined the Confucius analytic reading, you probably know they have a different way to interpret, okay? So they have the standard interpretation, which is Zhu Xi's interpretation. So Zhu Xi's interpretation becomes standard. So that's kind of test. And just like Fei Wu talk about, it's horrendous because that's a standard. You just have to talk about, I have a different opinion. No, sorry, you know, that's keep in your mind. Don't write your own opinion. Write Zhu Xi's opinion. And to the Ming dynasty and the Qing dynasty, to the later time, you will see the writing, they even have the writing style. Not only the contents, the style has been limited, so-called 8-leg essay. So the writing become very rigid. They have the 8th part of writing, just like, I think that's a good training if you learn this one. I think when I was young, one teacher taught me this and make my writing very well because I can write a good argument, you know, based on this structure. But basic is not help, okay, if you become expert, because it's good for the starting. I think just like everybody through the education know that, right? When you started, teacher use, okay, follow this format. And that's a good way to do it. But if you do it for your lifetime, that's terrible. But unfortunately, the imperial test to the end become people write in this style. So that's the thing. And the 1905, eventually the Qing dynasty ended this kind of test. But this culture has been prevailed. Just like people in today, I live in Singapore, I know they have kind of the national test when you in the primary school and in the high middle school and the college. Taiwan today still have it. China call it the Gaokao. Japan still have this kind of the so-called United Universal Entrance Exam. Okay, different country have a different name. For sure, I know Vietnam has it, Taiwan, Hong Kong still have it, China have it, Korean have it, Japan have it. Okay, so I'm not sure Malaysia, but this country with Chinese influence, they all have this kind of test. Even today, okay, when you go when you enter college, you have to pass this test. And don't mix up with this one is, oh, that's the same as ACT and SAT. No, because ACT and SAT is just for reference. And this kind of test is standardized, okay, clear cut. So for example, I remember when it's not pass, non-pass. It's all decide which school you can enter and which department you can do it. So I think in my class, in my college, we have 50 people and our score is within 1 point. I think my point is like 624, something like this. And if it's 623, you are not allowed in this group. You're going to the next group. So it's very difficult and a very specific, okay, test. Yeah, Pin.
Yes, I see a question in the chat. Fei will ask, before Sui Dynasty, how were civil servants selected? So yeah, I just want to answer that real quick. Is one common mechanism during the Han Dynasty and down to the Sui Dynasty was basically recommendations by local officials, so-called 举孝廉. So 举 means to elect, but it wasn't really election. It was more like a recommendation. And 孝 is filial piety, and 廉 is being ethical. So local officials were responsible for every year to nominate so many people to the imperial court, saying that these are the most outstanding people in my county, and the imperial court should consider them for assignment.
Yeah, thank you, Pin. Actually, I think one thing we need to, most of people probably not misunderstand it, including Asian and Western. China, it is China, this place. It's never been a feudalism system. Okay, like Western Europe, it's been a feudalism system for a long, long time. China at the year 200 BC, the Qing dynasty, when China started united, is no more feudalism system because it's a centralized government. Okay, so in this case, you don't use your relatives or the aristocracy too much. Basically, you will need people from outside to help you govern. So that's the different system. That's why civil service developed. So if we have no question, okay, I hope everyone understand to this one. And I just want to make sure at this moment, I want you to at least who is Zhu Xi, and Zhu Xi is very important. So I will move on to the next part. We're talking about his philosophy. And I will follow what Feng You Lan talked in this book. Zhu Xi is kind of Platonic idealist. Okay, let's put it this way. And he is, let's call him a dualism. Okay. So just brief talk about Plato's idea or form. Okay, I like to use this way to explain Plato. When we see apple, there's green, the pink, the red, how do we know this is, I think this one is apple, okay? According to Plato, we have an idea, the perfect form of apple somewhere, okay? In the mind or in heaven, we don't know. That's a different school we'll discuss. So since we already have this idea, so when we see apple, the real apple, we know this is apple. Okay, same as dog, same as people, and everything. So of course, Plato or Socrates want to talk about is the good. How do I know this thing is good? Because we have the form of ultimate good, the goodness itself, good itself in your mind. So you know something is good, is bad. It's pre-net, okay? Innate, you don't have to learn, it's there. So that's Plato's idea, or you want to call Socrates' idea. So this kind of idea, okay, it developed in Zhu Xi or during the Song scholars. So we will see the same, the key I just summarized in a very simple way. Basically, it's the same principle. Okay, the universal principle is for both nature, human. So everything has its own principle and they are the same principle. Okay, so human nature just is 性即理. Okay, in Chinese, basically talking about human nature. Okay, is the universal principle. Okay, and just like Western philosophy, the so-called perennial subject, people keep talking about the existence of God, the immortality of soul, human free will. Chinese scholars, Chinese philosophy has been discussing the human nature, okay, for centuries. Okay, so human nature is the principle. Okay, so that's Zhu Xi's philosophy. So if we understand the Zhu Xi's philosophy is kind of the dualism, so we can see Zhu Xi's, I would like to go through some terms, okay, which is very specific in Chinese philosophy, and Zhu Xi make it very clear for these terms. Okay, so first, all things, okay, so-called 10,000 things, okay, including sentient and non-sentient things, have their universal principle, which is called Li. Okay, and the universal principle is prior to thing, just like in Plato, the form idea are prior to matter, or you want to call universal and particular. Universal is prior to particular. Okay, so another school, for example, empiricism, right? Like Jiang Locke, or we'll call it the tabula rasa. So you learn everything from the particular, then you develop the universal. Okay, that's the different school. But in Zhu Xi's school, and the Platonic idea, the universal is prior to particular. I think that's the key difference. Okay, so if you remember or you participate in last year's section, we talked about the people about 100 years before Zhu Xi. At the time, they start to be interested in the cosmology. So people like Shaoyong, Zhou Dunyi already start to talk about Taiji, okay, and Wuji. Okay, Taiji is, if you know Tai Chi, Kung Fu, okay, the same word, but the good translation is the spring ultimate. According to Zhu Xi, Taiji or spring ultimate means the highest principle. All right, and Wuji, That means beyond that, that's nothing. There's nothing beyond that. So that's according to Zhu Xi's explanation. So it kind of tied the philosophy to metaphysics in Western term, or you want to call it cosmology, this way. And of course, in Chinese philosophy, usually focus on this word more than the other word. So some word we will talk about. I think that I have a detailed introduction in last year's section, but I can briefly talk about one is that this kind of word has been constantly appear in all Chinese philosophical discussion. The universal principle, qi, okay? I think in today we probably don't have to, I probably don't have to explain what's qi. Okay, people talk about qi gong or qi. Xing means nature of things, human nature, or the dog has its dog's nature. Okay, for a cup have a cup's nature, so that's called nature. Xing and xing, that's the physical body. So this four word, okay, is important in Chinese philosophy. So let's look at how we look at the Zhu Xi's dualism, right? So basically on the two part, right? On this part, it's immaterial part, and this one is a material part, just like Plato's or any all the philosophical tradition. Right? When you talk about dualism, then the next question would be which two, right? If you ask Descartes, that's mind and the body, right? So when you ask Plato, okay, that's idea, form, and matter particular. So there's a two things in general. One is immaterial, one is material. So please remember, qi is material thing. Okay, so that's the two part in Zhu Xi's dualism. And here I use the word xin. Okay, strictly translation means heart, but Chinese heart is a little bit different. They have the meaning of mind. So when you translate as mind, it's also wrong because mind is immaterial, but in Chinese word, xin is material. So so I decide to translate as a heart mind. Okay, that if you know Chinese, that's the word xin. That means material mind. Okay, if you put this way. So that's Zhu Xi's dualism. And Zhu Xi is not an inventor. Basically, he has collect all kind of philosophy argument from 100 years from the people. And we already know, okay, Mencius 300 BC, he started to talk about human nature, xing. Okay. Zhang Zai is the person, even qi is not his invention. It's been talking for a long time, but Zhang Zai has a theory, okay, who is about 100 years before Zhu Xi. Okay, Zhang Zai talking about qi. Okay, Chen Hao and Chen Yi, that's the brothers. Okay, Chen Hao, okay, he focused on heart mind, xin xue. Okay, so basically he talking about human heart a lot. Okay, and his younger brother Chen Yi focus on different things, which is universal principle. Okay, so Chen Hao, they are 1 year apart, but Chen Yi lived much longer. Okay, so his philosophy probably more popular. Okay, so Zhu Xi kind of inherit all of this, and then that's his organized philosophy. Okay, Andrew, please.
Sorry, I just I just need a little bit of clarification on the heart mind. I mean,
Okay.
you say it's a physical principle.
Mm-hmm. Physical thing, material. I use the word material.
Okay, it's a material principle, but is it also the connection to emotion, thought? Is that also part of it?
Yes, it's the emotion is related to that, and then you see I put this side, okay, and including to qi, right? That's all. Kwang, you have a better answer.
No, I don't have a better answer, but I would like to add some details.
Please.
I think that I absolutely agree that seeing the heart mind, first heart mind is probably the best English translation in ordinary words, okay? Because as Andre said, heart mind, if you want to use a modern neurobiological concept, heart is the emotional component and mind is the cognitive component. Okay, so it's the emotivo cognitive dimensions of the human. Because let's not forget, as Jason said at the beginning of his presentation, during the Song Dynasty, Confucianism has been a lot influenced by Buddhism, and certain concept has been clarified. Okay, because the notion of meditation, for example, existed in China in the past. But I would say that the arrival of Buddhism in China around the year zero, the first century AD, helped a lot the Chinese scholar to use to clarify conceptually the way they explain it. And what is called in Sanskrit the jnana or pragya, pure consciousness, okay, is different from heart mind or from the emotivo conceptual dimensions, because in the meditation understanding, the emotivo cognitive dimension is still part of matter, okay? Because qi is not spiritual in the sense of pure consciousness, but it's still the most subtle part of matter, and qi is material. And beyond qi is precisely the pure form, okay? What Plato called the ideas, eidos, because as you probably know, ideas in English from Greek eidos and meaning forms, and that is there that that Chu Hsi is very interesting because he put things very clearly from the metaphysical perspective, what is matter and what is not. Okay, Li is not matter and Qi is matter.
Yeah, thank you, Kwang. Okay, so basically that's exactly I want to talk about this part, right? So it's very, very clear-cut dualism, right? In material part, you can look at this side, okay? This Li and the Qi, right? They are paired together, okay? But one is material, one is immaterial. So immaterial is universal principle Li, which will be, associated with qi, all right? And then your nature, which is immaterial. So you cannot, okay, so I'm an active person. The activity, the activeness is immaterial, but my body is moving, so it's material. So basically you can put on this side as a dualism. And another way to look at is the one cause the other. Okay, I will call your human nature. How do we explain? Okay, this person is a good person. This is evil person. This one is optimistic person, because your nature is different. But what causes is the universal principle. What causes? Let's put it this way. Same as Andre asked the question, right? So emotion, something, that's by your heart, your mind, but your qi is controlled. That's the cause and the result. And I have to admit, Chinese language, the cause and result is not very clear, but I developed that's the idea. They're related together. So I think I will stop here for a moment. Okay, if you have a question, comment, because to this moment, I just want to, I summarize what Feng You Lan talking about in Zhu Xi's philosophy. I just try to make it simple, clear. Okay, basis dualism. They have the four things we talk about: Li, which is the universal principle, Qi, and I don't know how to translate, but nature and the physical body we call Xing. But to a person, I want to explain here, we call Xin. So if you talk about cup, okay, that's the Xing, that's the physical body. But talk about human, other than my body, because it's human, I'm human, so we all have a heart mind. So that's the 4 things in Zhu Xi's philosophy. We have Joe and Mira. Joe, please.
So this is going to be a very basic question, but I figured it's just good to get clarification for my purposes, at least. Is this idea of how do you go from I understand how you can go from a particular to a universal, but can you explain how do you start with go from a universal to a particular? Does that make sense? I mean, as far as like philosophically speaking, I don't know how you can determine, I don't know how you can determine a principle before your particular experiences.
Okay, so let's put it this way. Okay, if you have the okay, so let's put it this way. If you see a dog, okay, in Plato's idea, okay, you know this one is dog because you have the form of dogness, okay, or you see a cat, you have catness in your mind, so you know this one is dog. In Zhu Xi's idea, you see a dog, then dog has dog's principle, universal principle, okay, on that. So that's the relationship between a particular and universal. So I think I call universal principle, and actually the focus is on principle, not on universal, okay? Because it's very, put this way, it's not very clear. Dog has dog's universal principle, or Li, okay. Jason, okay, as a person, I have my own principle. Are these two the same? According to the philosophy, they are the same, okay, in a way, okay. So Chinese doesn't have the uppercase or lowercase, so we should call one is uppercase, so-called Taiji, okay. That's why Zhu Xi also talk about Taiji in this way. So that's the situation, okay. I think I understand, Joe, your question, but that's the only thing I can answer. I hope, I see Pin, you want to answer Joe's question in a different way?
Oh, no, actually, I'll wait and I have a question
Okay.
for you later.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go through the we have Mira and I think it's Penny and
Thank you, Jason.
okay. Amira, please.
Pretty much the same confusion. Because I'm pretty sure that he said that the nature is universal principle. So these two things are the exactly same thing.
Yes.
I don't know if I misread it or
no, he says right. So
the causation and result, is it how did you come to the
I understand. Yeah, that's my word. I explained that's my word. Because,
okay, I see.
So that's another very strange thing, right? Chinese use the word 性即理. We can say 性 is 理. Can we say 性 equal to 理? Is these 3 sentences are the same or not? That's my question, right? Amira, I think that's a hard question, right? It's not an easy question. Chinese word will use A, G, B, right? So we will translate as A is B. Does that mean also A equal to B? Okay, that's a difficult question.
Okay, I see.
Okay, so I'm not expert. I think you need I plan to read Hu Shi. Okay, he talk about ancient Chinese logic in ancient Chinese. Okay, something like I think I should spend some time to study. He has profound research on this part, and I read some of them. That's why I start to understand, the difference. But it's difficult.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you are welcome. Yeah, Penny, please.
Okay, I just had a question, from the reading. I know you've got the universal principle there, which I guess is the Li.
Yes.
And then they have something that they called the top universal principle, the supreme ultimate.
Taiji, yeah.
Yeah, is that on this chart, or would that be something like above universal principle?
That's a part. I don't think Zhu Xi make it very clear. But of course, some scholar may say he's clear, but I don't know. But my understanding from the book is that's ultimate, principle. Okay, so that means everything have the one same principle. So put it this way, you can say dog has dog's particular universal principle, which is lowercase, and the Taiji is the uppercase, That's the only one principle, the top principle. And another one called Wuji, that means after that, that's nothing. So I think that's the way to understand. Yeah. Pin, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a comment to share on the question. So when I was reading this chapter, probably biased by my own training, I found it very easy to understand if I understand Li as basically laws of physics, and Qi in Chu Xi's meaning as the physical world itself. So the laws of physics presumably existed even before the Big Bang, even before this current universe was initiated. But then I have to say, when I was reading only the English chapter in English, I was thinking, oh, this Qi must be the other character, the one that's for like Qi mean, 君子不器. That Qi would have made more sense. I have to say that Zhu Xi's use of the Chinese character Qi here seems to me very different from the way Mencius used it. Do you agree? Mencius used it as kind of a righteous morale or energy. 浩然之气.
I know.
Here the Qi is referred to, so it's quite confusing. I have to say that Zhu Xi's definition, he made Qi into his own jargon. And he used a character that in common Chinese language, even in classical language, it means something quite different, seems like, from what he says. Do you agree with that?
Okay, I think that's a good subject that you ask. Okay, first, Zhu Xi is the person in I don't know you know this or not. In Great Learning, Zhu Xi insert a lot of words, right?
Yeah, that's why I never liked him. He really annoyed me when I read 大学, when I read it, and then he wrote basically like the last 20% of it.
Yeah, and he changed the word. He just disagreed, so he changed it. Okay, that's
exactly.
That's the way he. But anyway, let's forget about this one. And about the Qi, right? Yes, I agree with you. His interpretation is definitely different than Mencius. Okay, so let's put this one Qi, okay, in 3 steps, right? In the ancient, Confucius, before Confucius' time, Chinese already talk about Qi, which is in the I Ching, they talk about yin yun, right? So that's the Qi, right? That's the one form everything. Okay, so the weather, the earth, that's the component, like the monad in the Leibniz talk about monad. That's the thing created everything. So Mencius has a great invention. He put the Qi as a moral sense. It's in human, because human's Qi, if you control Qi, you have a different kind of moral sense. Zhu Xi make another step because he inherits the so-called ontological argument, or you want to call the metaphysics in the early Song dynasty. So he kind of combined them together. So his qi is less moral sense, but more on the cosmology sense. And you will say, if you have to categorize in the Western philosophy, the qi is on the metaphysical side. So I think okay, one way I can talk about, I think about in this way to talk about principle and the qi, right? In hold on, in Zhu Xi's idea, I think the Feng You Lan talk about which one comes first, okay? But Feng You Lan's explanation is qi is timeless, but Li is timeless. Just like you said, before Big Bang, it's already have Li. And the Big Bang created the qi. That's the starting, okay? And that's everything, okay? Yeah. And one way in Christian you can talk about this, the God, because the God is timeless. It's always there. And during the period of time, incarnation, there's a Jesus come up, okay? Okay. So I think that's another way to talk about. Yeah. Yeah, we will have a long discussion when we talk this one, because that's a big subject. Kwang, please.
Yes. I think that Feng You Lan is very right to make the rapprochement between Plato's ideas and Chu Hsi metaphysics. And I would like to make the big rapprochement in my understanding, and we can have a discussion about that. Because let's not forget for Plato that the three supreme ideas, okay, in his meaning, okay, three supreme eidos, the three big forms, are truth, goodness, and beauty, okay? And for him, truth is the son of the absolute. So in my mind, the equivalent in Chu Hsi's metaphysics for truth, goodness, beauty, the three supreme idols in Plato philosophy, is precisely Tai Chi, okay? Because Tai Chi, as you said, can be translated as universal principles or supreme principles. And that is exactly equivalent to the supreme idols by Plato, okay? Truth, goodness, and beauty. We have to take those ideas as a general framework. And from that, in the Chinese tradition, from Tai Chi, you have yin yang, and after yin yang, you will have the 10,000 things, okay, the interaction between yin yang. But yin yang is subordinated to the big principles of truth, goodness, and beauty. And that is the three supreme idols, or the three supreme Tai Chi. And why I'm saying that? Because in my understanding, there's a problem that is not even solved by us nowadays, okay? The problem of consciousness. Because what is dominant in our present day explanation for the productionist consciousness is that because we have a very complex brain, and because of the interaction in the neurons and so on, it will give rise to consciousness as something derived from the complexity of the chemical and the physical interactions. I have never been very impressed by that explanation, okay? Because you can give a typing machine to a monkey, and I'm not sure that simply by playing with the typing machine, the monkey would write a Shakespeare play, for example. So for me, it's exactly to say that simply the complex interaction of chemical and physical stuff will give rise to consciousness. But you can flip the explanation the other way, okay? And that is precisely the interaction between Li and Qi, or between eidos, the universal principles, and matter, in the sense that Qi and Li and Qi existed in a timeless manner, but Qi, the energy matter dimension, need the principle to be organized into a specific object or a stuff, okay, in the phenomenal reality. And I think there is the problem. How because the traditional explanation is that the more you have a densification of qi, the more you will have a gross object. Okay, for example, a stone is more gross than a flower. So the qi of the stone is denser than the qi of a flower. But it depends also of the li governing that qi. So there's an interaction between the supreme form, and let's not forget the three supreme forms are truth, goodness, and beauty. And those three will create the powers of those three supreme forms of truth, goodness, and beauty with the polar opposite of yin and yang, masculine and feminine, will give birth to the 10,000 things.
Yeah, thank you, Kwam. I know it's very difficult, and I think that my next section will cover on this part. Thank you, Kwam, to give heads up on this one. Sounds like you always read my mind. Yeah, Madeline, please.
All right, well, this is the question I had about the reading, which is right in line with what Quan was talking about. But maybe he'll cover it in the next section. It was about
Next week we'll cover about yin yang and the 5 elements. How does the everything create? You know, this kind of.
It says where it seems to me that the qi depends upon the li for its operation. Thus, when there is an agglomeration of qi, the li is also present within it.
Yeah.
It is so because the qi has the capacity to condense and thus form things, but the li lacks volition or plan and has no creative power. The li constitutes only a pure, empty, and vast world without shapes or traces, and so incapable of producing anything. But the qi has the capacity to undergo fermentation and condensation, and thus bring things into existence. And yet, whenever the qi exists, the li is present within it, presumably just even as the principle of existence. So that section I was a little unclear on because it really doesn't seem to correspond very well to Plato. You know, it seems
okay.
a much more Chinese way of thinking about energy and matter than Plato has.
I have to agree with you, you know, and if you, any two philosophers, you say, oh, this one is this guy, I think it's always wrong, but just for people to understand. So that's the part that I think you are right. It's more Chinese than Plato. I totally agree. And I think the Feng You Lan explanation is, to me, I think it's clear, because I think the Chinese traditional argument is, if you remember Cheng Hao and Cheng Yi, these two brothers, Zhang Zai, okay, the difference is here. So-called qi li zhi zheng, okay, the compete between li and the qi, right? So these two, they all agree they exist side by side. One is material, one is immaterial. But in Zhang Zai's idea is everything is qi. The movement of qi, you can figure out that's the di, okay? And then Zhu Xi's idea is this li is more important because this one, just like Pin said, this li exists before the Big Bang, okay? But the Big Bang creates qi, okay? So which one is dominate? I think that's the question. And then if you have the different idea, which one is dominate, then you will have different kind of metaphysics. And if you have different kind of metaphysics, you have different kind of philosophy of on the moral side, because all Chinese philosophy focus eventually will go to moral and the political. And I think later on, I probably will try to convince you, Madeline, Zhu Xi is very similar to Plato on the political side. So anything else? And let me move on for the next part. I think I showed this one before, and then basics, that's the traditional argument, right? When we talk about the human nature, people like Chinese like to talk about human nature and the good and the evil, same as when we talk about moral, we will talk about good and evil. So I kind of list a few philosophers. Okay, first, human nature is good or bad. Okay, that's past. Okay, during the Mencius time, Mencius argued human nature is good, but later on, and before that, I think Mencius contemporary. Okay, there's another person called Gao Zi. Gao Zi's argument that human nature is no good, no bad. Mencius' argument that human nature is good, and later on Xun Zi argue human nature is bad. Okay, but forget about human nature is bad or human nature is good, neither good nor bad. For 1,000 years, Chinese people believe, or Chinese philosophy, or believe human nature is good, and how to explain human nature is good and where is the evil coming from. That's the argument. Just like in the Western philosophy, for 1,000 years, all the philosophers try to prove the existence of God, but nobody said there's no God, right? So your proof is always positive. You always want to prove the existence of God. Nobody said, okay, I prove there's no God. So same thing. They just try to talk about human nature is good. So Mencius, he's based on qi and of course, his qi a little bit different than Zhu Xi's qi and the human nature. And then, so, our nature, we have naturally good. So moral cultivation would be organic growth, right? So, and why is bad? Because the environment is bad, okay? Because the government is bad, so make people doing some bad thing. That's Mencius' argument. Then to 1,500 years later, or 1,500 years later, Chen Hao and Chen Yi, two brothers, they have a different theory on this one. So Chen Hao is talking about, because his theory based on the heart mind, and so his argument on human nature is good. His goodness basically is a psychological good, right? So how do you do the moral cultivation? Meditation, rituals, okay. And then since it's related to qi, so you have the bad qi, and then that's the source of evil. His brother focused on universal principle, which is Li. So I think we talk about its basics. The Li itself is good. All right. So that's Zhu Xi is going to inherit. All right. So so scholars call it Chen Yi and Zhu Xi's argument, human nature is good, is ontological good. All right. So basically, the moral cultivation we will talk about later. Basically, they can doing the sincere, and then they have the step by step to moral cultivation. And this one will kind of move the Confucians to the religious-like, okay, movement. Okay, so where's the source of bad? Okay, the evil, that's the human craving, desire. That's the bad, the source of evil coming from. So if you look at this chart, okay, I try to explain this one. This one is, if you look at the whole idea, right? We have the universal principle, and we have the qi, which exists in time, right? So this one is timeless. This one is in time. So this one is always good, universal principle. And then they have a qi. Qi, we all know they have yin and the yang. They have a yang. Okay, yang means movement, and the yin is quiescence. Okay. So then there's a movement, they have a 5 element, they have the curing, there's a regenerate each other. So everything, heaven and earth and everything will create in this one, including our human body, right? So if you talk about our human world, right? Same thing, you have the universal principle and then you have a qi. They have the clear, I think Kwang is talking about this one, right? You have clear and the turbid, right? So the clear qi, you will have the good nature, and then turbid, you have the bad nature. So kind of Zhu Xi move on the, instead of argue human nature is good or bad, he moved back to the universal principle. Okay, Zhu Xi and Cheng Zhu, Cheng Yi and the Zhu Xi. On the universal principle, the Di, and sometimes they call Tian Di, the principle of heaven. That's good. But the Qi, you can have clear or turbid. That's good and evil coming from. So we continue this chart, you will see, so you have the universal principle, which is Di, and they have the clear and the turbid. That's good and evil. Let's make your human nature, right? That's why everybody has a different nature. So some have more clear part, some have less clear part or more evil part. So that's human nature. Then this nature is determined your heart mind, your Xin heart mind, right? So your heart mind basics, that's create the function, the power of your mental power. So some people are smart, some people are good in the martial art, some people are good in physics, some people are good different skills. That's all innate power controlled by your heart. So consciousness, mental power, talent, capability. So Chinese call Cai, Qi Lin. Okay, so endowment. Right. So Feng You Lan Zhu Xi make some example, right? So like a candle, okay. Candle is like your heart mind, right? When you burn it, you will have fire, heat, and the light. That's the function. So that's a heart mind, that's you. Another example is the Chinese herb, right? If you know Chinese herb, I don't know much, but basically each herb has different properties, right? Something you call the cooling, healing, floating, sinking. That's a different property of the herb, right? Which is immaterial, just like a human nature. Okay, so each herb has a different nature, different property, and then when you use it, okay, cook it, eat it, they have the curing function. That's like a human talent, a human capability. So I think that's the metaphor on the this one, yeah. So that's the whole picture of Zhu Xi's philosophy. Yeah. We have, is Joe, you have a hands up?
Yeah, but you actually just answered my question. So
okay.
It's no problem.
Okay, so okay, good. I can answer the question before you ask. That's good. Good sign. So I will stop here for a moment. That's kind of complete on Zhu Xi's moral philosophy. Okay, and then I probably will skip 4th, which is mentions, and I just use for reference. Okay. So any question, comment? No. Mira, please.
I became a little confused again. In I think another concept, I don't know if I remember wrong. Qi, there's a same pronunciation but different character.
Which word? Excuse me. Which
qi.
word? Qi and
Qi.
Qi and
it means instruments, like 机器的器.
Oh, that's different.
It's a different thing that you're talking about here, right?
No. Okay. So
it's the same.
No. Okay, that's very important. That's the problem of the Chinese word, because when you English. Okay, let me do this way. Okay, so you talk about Let me write it.
Well, I think she's asking, I had the same confusion because when I read Feng You Lan's chapter, he one of the first mentionings of qi, in parentheses, he wrote literally meaning instrument. So
Yes.
that's why I thought, oh, it was the other the character that Mira's referring to.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so let me try to type. Okay, here. Let me type. Okay, just 1 minute. Do you see this word?
Mhm.
Okay, so I think this word is people got confused on this one. Okay, this word qi, right? And that's another qi, right? This qi we should translate as the physical body of physics, right? So that's the material. But this qi is also material, but it's a formless. Okay. So I think, I read this one, and they are. I think here is this qi will associate with. You can consider the human body, and the qi is prior to this qi. I think that's the part.
Right.
And,
You're right.
that
I
very-
think what I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think what Madeline was reciting earlier, I think what the qi that she was reading, I think is this qi.
Which one?
It's a new one.
Yes, that's the chi I was referring to. Thanks.
Oh, okay. So that's the two qi, and then both are material. And this one, I will say, this one is a formless. This one has form. Okay, so all right. So thank you for asking this question. And so I will quickly go through the mentions 4 seats, and I'm not going to read the text. Okay. So we will have a chance to argue on this one. That's the famous part of Mencius' argument, right? So all the Chinese philosophy, usually people don't try to say, okay, he's wrong, okay, doing this. Basically, they try to do a lot of effort to prove the ancient sage is right. Okay. So Mencius famously talk about human nature is good, and he talked about 4 seats argument, right? So he talked about 仁义礼智. Okay, this li is ritual, not the principle. Okay, so he talked about 仁, which, okay, you can look at this way, right? That's your nature. Okay, if you remember the chart, the nature, then which is properties like cooling, heating, floating, sinking as the property of a verb. Right, so they have a different kind of property, which Mencius called 4 seats of 四端. Okay, that's the human nature. Then you have different kind of heart mind. Okay, so it is hard to talk about. This heart is material, but basic in Chinese and Mencius' word, he talk about 4 heart mind, 四心, right? So sympathy, shamefulness, complaisance, and judgment. And the basics, the power, right? You will hidden sorrow because you see the some people suffer. You also feel sorry for them, even you don't know the person. Even a dog lost 1 leg, you feel sorry, feel sad for that dog. That's nature. Okay, that's your sympathy, innate. You feel embarrassment and shame, right? So nobody want to walk naked on the street because you feel embarrassed. Okay, even you tell you nothing wrong, you feel embarrassed. Okay, and then you will always decline and yielding to your parent, to the people you respect, and you always have innate judgment about the feel of right or wrong. Okay, so that's basics. That's Mencius' argument on the format, and the Zhu Xi is. Everything his philosophy is to prove all this one and build. Because Mencius just say so. Okay, he didn't have a strong ontological or metaphysical background on this. And Zhu Xi bring back all this one together. So this one I cannot stop to thinking about is in the 18th century, the movement, the English moral sentimentalist, right? The moral sentimentalist start from the third Earl of Shaftesbury, who is the disciple, student of John Locke. He rejects John Locke's empiricism on the moral side. Basically, he believed human nature, the innate, okay, before we learn everything, we already have innate feeling of right and wrong. And this tradition has been carried on through the Francis Hutcheson, David Hume to the John Adams, right? Before John Adams write the Wealth of Nation, and he wrote the, I forget the name, but basically it's the moral sentimental argument on that. So I will move on for another one, and before we do the discussion, so moral cultivation. So if you put all this one, the moral cultivation will be simple. Basics is the Zhu Xi picked the book, Great Learning, 大学, and Pin and I, we already discussed this one. And last year, January, when we start the first section, we talk about great learning. Okay, so I think I will have a chance to reintroduce this simple text. Okay, so if you understand Zhu Xi and reread this one, you probably have a different concept on this. So basics, you talk about step by step. We can call it the beginners, Confucian beginners handbook. You start from the investigation things. 格物致知, 诚意正心, 修身齐家, 治国平天下. I think everybody through this kind of Chinese Confucius school all can memorize all this very easily. And the English word is investigating things, extended knowledge, making intention sincere, rectifying one's own heart, actually heart mind, refining oneself, that's take care of yourself. And the next step will be harmonizing one's family and governing the states and pacify the world. So so you can see this one, that's why Zhu Xi put this one. I think at the beginning, someone asked about, or probably you already have this question, right? Since you talk about the universal principle is so important, how are you going to study this one? How are you going to know this, right? The situation is Zhu Xi, since it's immaterial, how can you know it, right? So you will start from investigating things. So just like my example, you talk about dog, then they have the principle of the dog in there. And the famous thing is bamboo, right? You look at the bamboo, you study the bamboo, you will understand the principle of bamboo, which will be similar to the ultimate principle, universal principle. So everything will start from investigating things. That's why Zhu Xi put moral cultivation. I just summarize. I think Feng You Lan also summarized these three things: investigating of things, extension of knowledge, and attentiveness of mind. Okay, this one he added is important because that's a lot of question on that. Since you do the first step is investigating of things, then your extension of knowledge. So in other way, this one's supposed to make a scientific movement, right? So people will learn a lot of things and get a lot of knowledge, but actually it's not, because the purpose of investigating of things, extension of knowledge, is not to for the scientific development or to make our life easy, is to understand the ultimate universal principle. So Zhu Xi put this one, attentiveness of mind, because you have to keep this one in your mind. So you will not go wild to study bamboo, study animal, study cosmology, study a rock, and all kinds of things, because the purpose is the universal principle. So famously, he talked about 格物以治理, basically talk about investigating things in order to understand the universal principle. That's what he wanted to do. And no surprise, and kind of like answer Madeline's question, right? How we call the Zhu Xi and Plato are the, compare Zhu Xi and the Plato, Platonic ideas. Because you talk about political philosophy, we were surprised they probably very similar, right? Because Plato's Republic talk about philosopher kings. Zhu Xi, no surprise, you have this kind of metaphysics, this kind of moral sense, moral development. Eventually, your political philosophy is talking about the sage king. So in Zhu Xi's political philosophy, basics is no surprise, the Tao of the ancient kings. Okay, so that's the timeless principle, because it's ancient, it never changed, it's happened before time. That's the best way. So it's become a rigid hierarchical political system, and they use ritual and code of ethics to govern everybody's life. So that's Zhu Xi's movement, and that's the last section. Then we will have more thing, a few 10 minutes to discuss. And that's the other things I try to. It's not possible to put everything together, and I also don't want to put a continuous section on everything about Zhu Xi. You may feel very bored. So from time to time, I will bring some subject here. This one. So famous is the book, right? Commentaries on the 4 books. Okay, Zhu Xi's commentary. Okay, become a must read on Zhu Xi. Okay, and the another famous thing is so-called the Goose Lake meeting. That's between Zhu Xi and Lu Jiuyuan, or somebody called Lu Xiangshan. Okay, they have an argument when we talk about universal principle and the heart mind. Okay, universal principle, which one is dominant? So Lu Xiangshan, okay, another school will focus on the heart mind. So they have the debate in the Goose Lake. That's a very famous debate, and then it's hard to say who won, who lost. But my idea is Zhu Xi lived much longer. So Zhu Xi lived to the 70 years old. So he has more students, and it turned out his philosophy become dominant. And later on, about in the 500 years later, in Ming Dynasty, Wang Yangmin tried to bring up Lu Jiuyuan's philosophy. But we will talk about in the next section. Okay, I think it's in Feng You Lan's writing. That's a so-called Xinxue, the school of heart mind. Bai Ludong Shuyuan, Huaidiao Grotto Academy is a famous. He kind of like have a school, and today in Lushan, okay, in the middle south part of China. Okay, so that's the school. And another thing, if you want to only remember one thing, his teaching, okay. So, and actually that's not his word, that's Cheng Yi's word, but people always associate with Zhu Xi with this word, 存天理灭人欲, basically talk about if you want to follow Zhu Xi for one sentence, and that's the one he is talking about, keep the principle of heaven, remove the human desire. Because the principle, innate principle, timeless of heaven, that's good. That's the good thing you have to keep. Why have the bad people? Because you have the desire for food, sex, money, ranking. That's all human desire. You have to remove this one and keep the principle of heaven. So that's become his moral teaching, political teaching. And if you want to keep just one sentence about this, So that's Zhu Xi. And of course, is this one good or bad? Okay, that's another story. My job here is just bring his philosophy here, and to the matter, you agree or disagree, he is important because all the Eastern Asia follow his philosophy. So we have 2 hands up, and then let's have a few minutes to discuss this one. Kwang, please.
Yes, I think that what you said about the political dimension, putting together Chu Hsi and Plato is very interesting because, of course, in the 35 or so Platonic dialogues, you of course have the Republic talking of the ideal state, but you also have, for those having read Plato, a special trilogy, okay? And that trilogy is formed by the Theaetetus, the Sophist, and the Statesman. And in the Theaetetus precisely, for me, is the development of chapter 7 of the Plato Republic, because in chapter 7, he was describing the epistemological journey to the Son of the Absolute, to truth, goodness, and beauty. And in the Theaetetus, precisely the subject is about episteme, okay, which is most often translated as knowledge or science, but I prefer knowledge because it's rather to the ultimate knowledge. And the second part of that trilogy is precisely the sophists, meaning the people who would give a fake merchandise, an imitation of that knowledge. And finally, the final part of that trilogy is the statement precisely, how to create a perfect city with true knowledge and being careful not to be scammed by sophists giving imitation of true knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you are right. Definitely right. And then I only put just a small part, okay, of the Republic on there to compare. Yeah. In this way, Plato is much bigger, okay, than what I present here. For example, you talk about trilogy, right? He has the sophist statement, and suppose he should have another philosopher, but he didn't write. And then after the Republic, he writes the statesman, and then write the laws. That's another part of his political. So it's much more complex. So don't take this one as just Plato. That's just a small part of Plato. Thank you, Kwang, for reminding me. Yeah. Sebastian, please.
I'd like to just make a summary for myself. If the principle is actually or actually the chi is a realization of the principle, and the principle is something that we are like a realization. Right? The chi is the realization of that principle, and then we have to basically extend our knowledge to understand why the reason was made or what the result was. Is that something that, or that, is this what he's trying to present to us, that in essence you can't find the exact reason for its existence, but as soon as there's an action, as soon as there is something, let's say nature, or your realization that that has different characteristics, that's what we need to study.
Okay, let me answer in this way. I hope I answer your question. Okay. It's very important, okay, for Zhu Xi's school, right? You started from investigation of things. You are not doing the philosophical meditation. You start from investigating of things. But since the purpose of investigating of things is not to improve your life or understand or satisfy your curiosity, is to learn the principle. So the best thing to study is what? Okay, is reading the ancient book. So the argument between Zhu Xi and another school, Lu Jiuyuan, become the key difference here. Zhu Xi's idea is you have to go through all the ancient texts until your hair become all white or gray, okay, or lost all your hair, depending on how you do it. But basic, that's the way you do it. Then you will understand the ritual. Put in another school who is against the Zhu Xi. He said, as long as I understand the Tao or my heart, then I look at the ancient text. That's just the commentary of the Tao. Okay, so I hope this one kind of answer your question, or redirect, or probably I redirect your question to a different way. But
I do understand that principle, but in the beginning of the chapter, nothing exists, or there's no thing unless you have the principle. So if the Li or the principle is folded into the Qi, isn't that what we're trying to understand? I'm not saying there's any value to it or a judgment. I'm just saying it's so important, I think, if we're seeing the result, the Qi, of something that had existed before and always has existed, we're trying to explain the puzzle, so to speak. We don't have to have knowledge of the pieces. We just have to look at the puzzle and say, well, that looks like something special. Now, this may not be what the book is presenting, and the quick answer is no.
I think I have to say, I agree with you, that's your understanding, but I have to say this one. The purpose, unlike Western philosophy, Western philosopher will put the focus on the metaphysical side. So that's an important question, okay? But the Chinese probably don't see that's an important question, okay? They just bring this one for the purpose of your real life. So how to be moral, how to have a peaceful society. Okay, I think that's the thing. So big question. I don't think nobody answered. So how does Qi being, how does it reach the universal principle become a Qi, or how does this technically how they connect together? I don't see. At least I don't have an answer on that. And the Chinese text just talk about this and then move on. So that's and I have to say, Zhu Xi is probably already the great job in the Chinese standard, because 1,000 years people are not interested on this one. Yeah, I think continually we will have this question. And Kwang and Pin, I think we have two experts.
Thank you.
Kwang, please.
Yes. I would like to come back to, because in relation with what you just say, Jason, to Sebastian, I don't have the pretension that it's the answer, but it's one possible answer, okay? And I would like to go back to the 8 stages from the Tashui, the great learning, okay? Because once again, it's as we discussed last time when we were talking about Confucius, Sebastian, it's about being or doing, okay? And how to put those two together intimately, being and doing. And the Tashui tried to answer that by offering 8 stages, okay? And the first stage is very practical, okay? It's to put order in your affairs, okay? You have to be a good citizen. You need not to be a criminal, or very basic things like that. And the second stage is precisely what Jason said, extending your knowledge by investigation of things, okay? 格物致知 in Chinese. So, and that part is more the doing okay, the exploring into physical matter reality and so on. And in Chinese mentality, it's important, but it's not the ultimate. So we have a third stage, which is making intention genuine and be focused, meaning to be careful to your attentiveness, okay, in the sense of meditation, okay, in the sense that you need to be more in the level of Li, of the pure principle, rather than of energy matter. It doesn't mean that energy matter is not important, but in the Chinese or Eastern Asian mentality, it's not the ultimate. So 3 is making intention genuine and be focused, and 4 is balancing the mind, okay? So that precisely that balance of the mind is precisely, well, it's not a true balance, okay? Because what is understood here, that if your epistemological journey has been good, you should focus more on the Li than on the energy matter dimension, okay? And from there, you have what I call the practical consequences of your cultivation. Because number 5 is called cultivate yourself. But cultivate yourself, for me, is simply the summary of step 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I talk about step 1, 2, 3, 4, and step 5 is called cultivate yourself, but it's not a step, but itself. For me, it's the summary of 1, 2, 3, 4. And after that, you have the practical applications, with a 6, 7, and 8. Put 6, put order in your family. 7, assist in the governance of the state, and 8, bring peace to the world.
Yeah, thank you. And probably you want to introduce the Kwang, you want to have a section talk about the 大学.
Yeah, why? Yeah, why not? It's one of my favorite, and it's very short.
I should talk about, because I do it last year exactly the same time, and I remember that time my interest is more on the logic. How does 大学 lay out this logic to convince people? I focus less on the moral cultivation. And look, guys, you have pretty good understanding on this one. So please, if you want, let's have one to talk about this.
Sure.
Thank you. Pin, please.
Yeah, I just want to share my personal experience too. The 大学 is also one of my favorite books, despite that Zhu Xi wrote, altered the last part of it. And when I was young, when I read the part that Zhu Xi wrote, I always felt like, oh, it was really hinting at the beginning of empirical science, right? He was really encouraging everyone should take it upon ourselves as our duty to observe nature, observe everything in nature, and try to draw conclusions about what this Li is. So to me, it's observing nature to find the universal way, underlying principles and laws that how the universe works. And it's a great irony that starting from this kind of philosophy, what the end result was really his school of thought turned Confucianism into something akin to a state religion. And that his word, his interpretation was the only correct interpretation. Instead, that you would have logically more expected that by encouraging everyone to observe nature and learn what nature, what governs nature, that it would be intellectual freedom. But the end result was the opposite. Really, the Chenzhou era of Chinese history, namely the Southern Song Dynasty all the way down to the Ming Dynasty, was the intellectually most restrictive period, I would say, in all however many thousands of years of Chinese history. So anyway, just sharing that that observation.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I also have to hold my personal opinion when I do this one. But in another way, he's a great philosopher. Put it in another way, philosopher. Okay, this way. Yeah, I forget about the influence. Just like I like to bring up the example is Thomas
Yeah.
Aquinas, right? He's a great philosopher, but after him, actually, the Western Europe doesn't become more open, or become more, suppressed from the church. As long as after the Aquinas theology become the standard in the church. So same as Franciscan school. Okay, they probably did more bad thing than the good thing. So that's another subject. Quan, okay. You probably have a last word for today. So
yeah. Oops.
Yeah,
So just 2 seconds. I think that Pin is very right. The red man can do a lot of harm, but I would say also that the close-mindedness of the Ming Dynasty can be explained in part by the Mongol invasion too. Okay, so there is a historical context too.
oh yeah, that's a lot of the thing we can talk about after this one. So right now we are in the health of the Chinese history. Okay, so it's a good time to continue, and we will see. And I think that we have 10 minutes overtime, but that's considered good. So thank you, everyone. And the next week is Chinese New Year. Just please wait 1 or 2 days. Pin is going to tell me whether or not he has time. And I'm not sure I have time or not, but we try to make it, and in 1 or 2 days we'll do it. And I put in the chat, please sign up, and then if we have to change the subject or we have to postpone, and you will receive the notice. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and then hope to see you next week or the week after. And Happy New Year again for Chinese New Year. So, all right, see you.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks,
Happy New Year.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Jason.
you.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.